Adultery, betrayal, secrets. Part of the human condition since the beginning of time.
November 15th, 2020. 3 words destroy an empire worth $100 million. We need to talk. That text ends Carl Lentz's career. The celebrity pastor who baptized Justin Bieber in an NBA player's bathtub is done. But here's what nobody knew that Sunday. Carl's affair wasn't the disease-killing Hillsong, it was just a symptom. Because while millions sang their worship songs, something darker was spreading through every campus, every service, every perfectly produced Sunday. And it started decades before Carl ever preached his first sermon. 1983, Sydney suburbs. Brian Houston inherits a problem. His father, Frank, just handed him a church. 45 people, concrete walls, fluorescent lights. Nothing Instagram-worthy about it. But Brian sees something others don't. He doesn't see a church. He sees a brand waiting to happen. By 1992, everything changes. A worship leader named Darlene Zashar writes one song, "Shout to the Lord." Within months, our churches in Iowa are singing Australian lyrics. Churches in Nigeria, churches in Korea, same words, same melody, same feeling. This isn't just music anymore, it's a pipeline, and Brian controls the source. 1999, the church drops Hills Christian Life Center. Too long, too religious, too old. They pick something cleaner. Hillsong, one word, like Google, like Apple, like a company. The formula is simple but revolutionary. Take church. Remove everything that feels like church. Add concert lights worth $300,000. Sound systems that rival Madison Square Garden. Smoke machines. LED walls. Services that feel like festivals. Young people flood in. The ones who hated their parents' churches. The ones with tattoos their grandmothers hate. The ones who party Saturday and pray Sunday. Suddenly, church is the coolest place to be Sunday morning. But here's what Brian discovered that changed everything. You don't need to convert celebrities, you just need to attract them. Because when famous people show up, everyone else follows. And in 2010, he finds the perfect person to execute that plan in the world's biggest city. Carl Lentz doesn't look like a pastor. He looks like he manages rappers. Ripped jeans that cost $400. Supreme hoodies. Aviator sunglasses indoors. A haircut that takes 2 hours and costs more than most people tithe. When Hillsong taps him for New York City, they know exactly what they're buying. October 2010. Hillsong NYC launches in a nightclub. On a nightclub. While other churches fight over organs versus guitars, Carl's preaching where people were doing cocaine 6 hours earlier. The contrast is the point. The message is the medium. Then Justin Bieber shows up. One service. That's all it takes. Paparazzi start camping outside. TMZ runs segments. Entertainment Tonight follows. Suddenly, Hillsong isn't just a church story. It's a celebrity story. And celebrity stories sell. The baptism changes everything. October 2014. Carl baptizes Justin in Tyson Chandler's bathtub. The New York Knicks player's apartment. Not a church, not a river. A bathtub worth more than most cars. The photo goes viral. 50 million views. Every young pastor in America takes notes. Kevin Durant starts attending. Selena Gomez flies in for services. Vanessa Hudgens posts Instagram stories from worship. The Kardashians show interest. Each celebrity brings 1,000 regular people who want to breathe the same air. Services overflow. Oh, they add more. 4 services, 5, 6, Still not enough. But watch what happens backstage. Staff members can't get 5 minutes with Carl. He's always somewhere else. Another meeting with someone famous. Another courtside appearance. Another photo that needs taking. One former staff member puts it perfectly. We needed a shepherd. We got a celebrity manager. The money follows the fame. Donations spike. Merchandise sells out. Conference tickets go for hundreds.
Anong Hillsong NYC?
C brings in millions, but nobody's asking where it goes. They're too busy watching the show. Here's what nobody understood yet. When you build a church on celebrity culture, you live by celebrity rules. And the first rule of celebrity culture? Eventually, everyone falls. November 2020. Carl's phone lights up. Brian Houston calling from Australia. The conversation lasts 3 minutes. 3 minutes to end a decade. Failed moral conduct. That's the phrase they'll use. Clean. Corporate. Bloodless. Within 48 hours, Hillsong releases a statement. Carl Lentz is no longer employed. No details, no explanation, just done. The internet becomes a detective agency. Reddit threads explode. Twitter investigators dig. Instagram gossips spread theories. Then Carl confesses. Instagram post, November 5th. He cheated on his wife. Months-long affair. A designer from Brooklyn. The New York Post gets her name within hours. Her photos spread across tabloids. The pastor who preached purity lived a double life. But listen to what Carl doesn't say. He doesn't mention the church credit cards. The first-class flights to nowhere. The designer clothes billed as ministry expenses. The staff complaints filed and ignored. The warnings that never reached Australia. Because here's what really happened. October 2020. A month before the text. Hillsong conducts an internal audit. Not spiritual, financial. They find receipts that don't add up. It's expenses that don't make sense, a lifestyle that doesn't match a salary. The affair isn't why Carl got fired. It's why they could fire him without explaining the rest. Former staff start talking, anonymous at first, then publicly. Stories pour out. Carl berated employees, demanded impossible hours, created a culture of fear, but touched the right celebrities. So nobody touched him. One youth pastor reveals something darker. We reported problems for years. Brian Houston knew. The board knew. Everyone knew. They just didn't care until it went public. And that's when investigators start pulling threads. If leadership ignored Carl's problems, what else did they ignore? Who else got protected? The questions lead straight back to Australia. Straight back to Brian Houston. Straight back to secrets buried for decades. March 2021. Australian police make an announcement nobody sees coming. Brian Houston is under criminal investigation. Not for money. Not for affairs. For covering up child abuse. His father's abuse. The story breaks like this. Frank Houston, Brian's father, was a Pentecostal legend, preached to thousands, started churches across Australia, also molested young boys, multiple victims, multiple decades, the 1960s through the 1970s, children as young as 7. 1999. Brian finds out. A victim comes forward, then another, then more. Brian confronts his father privately, forces him to retire, pays one victim $10,000 for silence. Church money, and hush money, but never calls police, never reports the crimes, never tells authorities children were hurt. For 20 years, Brian keeps the secret, preaches about transparency, writes books about integrity, builds an empire on authenticity. While knowing his father destroyed children, and he helped hide it. 2014. The Royal Commission investigates institutional child abuse in Australia. They find Frank Houston's crimes. They find Brian's cover-up. They find the payment. The secret's out. But Hillsong keeps Brian as leader. The board knows. The global leadership knows. They gamble nobody else will care. They're wrong. 2021. Criminal charges filed. Brian Houston faces court for concealing serious crimes. Maximum penalty, 5 years prison. The man who built a worship empire might go to jail for protecting a pedophile. Then more women come forward. Not about Frank, about Brian. 2 incidents, 2 women. One involves texts, inappropriate messages to a female staff member, the kind that end careers. The second is worse, a hotel room, a Hillsong conference. Brian, allegedly drunk, enters a woman's room. She's not his wife. What happens next gets buried in legal language, but the woman reports it. Hillsong investigates internally. They find enough to discipline Brian, but not enough to announce publicly. Until they have to. Follow the money. That's what investigators always say. And when journalists and former staff finally follow Hillsong's money, what they find doesn't look like ministry. It looks like a private wealth machine dressed in worship music. $100 million flows through Hillsong globally every year. Maybe more. Nobody knows the exact number, because Hillsong never had to tell anyone. Religious tax exemption means no public audits, no mandatory disclosures, no accountability. For decades, the books stay closed, until they don't. 2022. Whistleblowers emerge. Documents leak. A formal report lands in front of the Australian Parliament, and the numbers tell a story completely different from the stage. Brian Houston's compensation isn't a salary. It's a lifestyle. First-class flights to every continent. 5-star hotels for speaking engagements that last 40 minutes. Private retreats in locations most people only see in magazines. One leaked expense report shows a single international trip costing $40,000. Church money, donor money, tithe money. But wait, there's more. Church credit cards appear in the financial records, used for designer clothing, expensive restaurants, personal entertainment. The justification given to staff: you have to look successful to reach successful people. Carl Lentz runs the same playbook in New York. Thousands spent on personal expenses. Dinners at Manhattan restaurants where entrees cost $80. Clothes that belong in fashion magazines, not pulpits. All billed back to the church. All approved somewhere up the chain. Now here's where it gets personal. While Brian's single trip costs $40,000, a single mother in Sydney tithes faithfully for 3 years. She gives money she needs for rent. She gives $8,000 total, believing God will multiply it back. He doesn't. But Brian's travel budget does. A young couple in New York donates their wedding savings, $15,000. Their pastor tells them it's a seed for their future. And their future arrives 2 years later, watching that same pastor resign in scandal while wearing a watch worth more than their car. Then there's the music. This is the part Hillsong never advertised. Every time a church sings Oceans, every time a worship team plays What a Beautiful Name, royalties flow. Millions of dollars annually from music licensing alone. But those royalties don't all go back to the church. They flow through private publishing companies. Companies owned by individuals. The same songs making people cry on Sunday are making specific people rich every single Monday. One former worship leader says it simply: "We thought we were serving God. We were filling someone's bank account. The financial structure wasn't accidental. It was architectural, built deliberately, layer by layer, year by year. Hidden behind baptisms and worship nights and celebrity sightings. And when it finally collapses, the people left holding nothing aren't the pastors. And they're the members who gave everything they had. But the money story isn't even the most devastating part. Because what happens next doesn't just destroy a church. It destroys something much harder to rebuild. March 23, 2022. Brian Houston resigns. A statement goes out. Words like season of change and personal failures. Carefully written, legally reviewed. It doesn't mention the hotel room. It doesn't name the women. It doesn't say criminal charges. It says nothing while saying everything. The dominoes fall fast after that. Dallas campus. Gone. Closes completely within weeks. Phoenix announces they're leaving the Hillsong network. Atlanta walks away. Kansas City disconnects. Melbourne implodes internally. London gets quiet. The global franchise that took 40 years to build starts unraveling in 40 days. Staff resignations flood in, not just pastors, worship leaders, youth directors, administrative staff, people who gave years,
or decades in some cases.
walking away from careers built inside one organization. One former campus pastor says, "I didn't leave a job. I left my entire identity." Then social media opens the floodgates. Stories pour in from every continent. Former members who stayed silent for years suddenly find their voice. Control tactics, manipulation, leaders who demanded unquestioning loyalty while living secret lives. Junior staff paid poverty wages while senior leaders flew first class. I had volunteers working 60-hour weeks for free while the church generated millions. One pattern emerges consistently across every campus in every country. Asking questions was dangerous. Challenging leadership meant being labeled divisive. Leaving the church meant losing your entire social circle overnight. Former members describe it the same way regardless of whether they attended in Sydney or Dallas or London. You didn't just go to Hillsong. You belonged to Hillsong. And until you didn't. The celebrities vanish quietly. No statements, no explanations. Justin Bieber stops mentioning Hillsong. Kevin Durant's association disappears from his social media. Selena Gomez moves on. The famous faces that made the brand powerful now want distance from the brand's damage. Hollywood moves fast when reputation is at risk. By mid-2022, the numbers tell the final story. Attendance down 70% across remaining campuses. Donations collapsed. Music licensing deals under review. The conference business that generated millions annually canceled. Staff count reduced from hundreds to dozens. Brian Houston's criminal trial begins in Australia. His defense team argues he didn't understand his legal obligations to report abuse. The prosecution argues he understood perfectly and chose silence over justice. The courtroom becomes the final stage for a man who spent 40 years performing on better ones. But here's what the attendance numbers and financial reports can't measure. The thing that doesn't show up in any spreadsheet. What happens to the people? Not the pastors, not the board members, not the celebrities, the regular people. The ones who showed up every Sunday. The ones who served. The ones who gave. The ones who believed. That story is the one Hillsong never tells. Because it's the most damaging story of all. Here's what collapse actually looks like. Not closing campuses, not resignations, not court cases. And it looks like a 58-year-old woman in Phoenix who spent 7 years volunteering every Sunday. running the welcome team, greeting strangers, making people feel seen. She finds out about the financial records on a Tuesday morning, reads the expense reports online, sits in her car for 2 hours, doesn't cry, just sits. It looks like a father in Dallas who brought his teenage son to Hillsong because traditional church felt disconnected. "This place will show him faith is real," he told his wife. His son is now 24, hasn't stepped inside any church since 2022. Won't talk about it. It looks like thousands of group chats going silent. Bible study groups that met for years. Friendships built around shared faith. Evaporating overnight because the thing that held them together turned out to be a brand, not a community. Former members across America describe the same experience regardless of which campus they attended. The moment they realized something was wrong wasn't the news reports. And it wasn't Brian's resignation. It was smaller than that. One woman from New York describes it perfectly. "I was singing Oceans on a Sunday morning, hands raised, eyes closed, and I suddenly thought, does any of this mean anything? Or have I just been really good at performing?" That question is the real damage, not the money, not the scandals. The question itself. Because once it enters your mind, it doesn't leave. Research on spiritual trauma shows something important here. Thus, when faith becomes attached to an institution rather than personal conviction, institutional collapse triggers identity collapse. People don't just lose a church. They lose their framework for understanding everything. Meaning, purpose, community, gone simultaneously. Hillsong's own worship music becomes complicated territory. Songs that carried people through funerals, through divorces, through cancer diagnoses. Now those same songs carry different weight. But one former worship leader says he can't play guitar anymore. Not because he lost faith in God, but because every chord takes him back to a stage he now associates with deception. Some people find their way through. Smaller churches, quieter communities. Faith rebuilt slowly, without smoke machines or celebrity sightings. One former Hillsong pastor now leads a congregation of 60 people in rural Tennessee. No production budget, no Instagram strategy. He says it's the first time ministry has felt honest. But here's the number that matters most. Studies on church attendance following high-profile religious scandals show that 60% of people who leave never return. Not to another church. To any church. They don't become atheists necessarily. They just become done. Done with institutions. Done with trusting leaders. Done with the whole structure. Hillsong at its peak claimed 150,000 weekly attendees globally. Do that math quietly. And now here's the question that nobody in religious leadership wants to answer publicly. Hillsong isn't alone. The model Hillsong pioneered. Celebrity pastors. Production-driven services. Personality-based congregations. That model didn't die with Hillsong. It spread. There are churches right now in your city running the exact same playbook. Same lights. Same aesthetic. Same culture of unquestioning loyalty to charismatic leadership. Brian Houston built something that looked like the future of church. Turns out, it was a warning about it. His criminal trial concludes in Australia with a verdict that shocks even his harshest critics. The details of that verdict and what it reveals about what Hillsong's board knew and when they knew it changes everything people thought they understood about how deep this goes. That story is still unfolding, and the people still inside churches that look exactly like Hillsong used to, they don't know it yet.